everyone, it's Jim of Shiloh Kahal, and today I want to quickly cover the subject of adoption and how it relates to Israel and the church and the covenant. So what I've done first here, as I've pulled up my scriptures and I've done it's a PDF document and I want to do a search in it. So I'm searching for the word adopt because that will also include the idea of adoption. When I put it in all of scripture, we find that adopt or adoption it comes up 5 times. And all 5 times relate to, all 5 uses of the term adoption are given to us through the writings of Paul in the Galatians, in Romans, 3 of them, 1 in Galatians, 3 in Romans, and 1 in Ephesians. So I would like to just quickly visit this topic and just review it and see what Paul is telling us about adoption. But let me also say that clearly I do not question Paul is a scholar of the scriptures. So if he's speaking in terms of of adoption, I don't really question why he's doing it necessarily, but I will strongly say that however he's trying to explain, whatever adoption is in his explanation, it is related to trying to quantify things from and qualify things from the scriptures. So to explain things from the scriptures, because there's no question that Israel was chosen. They are the children of the Father. And so, okay, so let's just get started here with Paul and his use of the term adoption. So here in Galatians, let me make this bigger for everybody. Give me a second. Should have already done this. So here we are in Galatians, and it reads like this. We're talking about verse 5, but let's just start in verse 4. But when the completion of the time came, Yahuwah sent forth his Ben, or son, born of a woman, born under Torah, meaning born under the requirements of Torah and failure to Torah, which is failure, subject to failing in Torah, which is if you're trying to be justified by Torah, you would be, you would just be in slavery to Torah, trying to live by Torah to be justified, standing in contrast to what he ultimately came to do, which is find justification in his work rather than the justification through keeping Torah. Okay, so in verse 5 it says, to redeem those who were under Torah, under that condemnation. And who would that be? That would be, of course, Israel, because a Gentile would have no clue what that even means. Well, I mean, they might have a clue, but they're not living it like Israel was. In order to receive the adoption as sons. So what's noteworthy here, as he is referring to these folks who are going to receive the adoption as sons, who is he referring to? The redemption of those who are under Torah. So really in this reference to the Galatians, he would be redeeming those who were under Torah to receive the adoption of sons. So that's not necessarily in his comment here, even though he's writing to the Galatians who would have been of the church. They would have been of the Gentile believers who have joined, but that's not who he's writing to here. I don't know how it could be, because those who are to receive the adoptions of son and who he came to redeem were those who were under Torah. And just to go back up to verse 4, but when the completion of time came, Yahuwah sent forth his Ben, born of woman, born under Torah, born into the tribes of Israel, and born to those who would be under Torah, under the condemnation of Torah that he resolved, and he came to redeem them, which is the resolving of that being under Torah, so that those who are under Torah, could receive the adoptions of sons, and then the Galatians would be joined to Israel, who have received the adoption of sons. And because you are sons, and now because you, referencing the Galatians, the Gentiles now, and because you are sons, Yahuwah sent forth the Ruach of Ben into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So the Gentiles now are able to cry the same thing that Israel is able to cry because they have joined Israel in all of their promises and all their hopes and all of their, in that future resurrection and in the relationship of father-child. So here he's talking about the adoption of sons to Israel, but now he's talking about the Gentiles having joined themselves to Israel, who had received the adoption as sons. All right, let's move on to the next. All right, so here we are in Romans. In what chapter? We are in Romans 8. And what does it say here? For as many, let's start in 14. For as many are led, for as many as are led by the Ruach of Elohim, which is the spirit of Elohim. For as many as are led by the Ruach of Elohim, these are the sons of Elohim, the children of Elohim. So if you want to be considered a child of Elohim, the son of Elohim, you need to be led by the spirit of Elohim. That spirit needs to be driving you into that position and into that role, into that place of being amongst the chosen. As in my most recent video that is about Israel and the Gentile who is the redeemed. Well, the redeemed are going to be those which are the sons of Elohim, will be those who love Elohim, follow Elohim, pursue Elohim, love his son, just all the things that go about wanting and following Elohim. So verse 15, for you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear. What is the spirit of bondage? There you are under Torah, because you have no hope apart. You had no hope that you could overcome the condemnation of the Torah, which is just, you knew you did wrong, and the Torah makes you stand as a condemned man, and you of your own strength, except for what the provisions that the Torah would give through the priest, you have no hope of overcoming that. But through Yahushua, now you have that hope in overcoming that spirit of bondage again. But you received the Ruach of adoption as sons, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. So he's writing to Rome. Now Rome had some of redeemed Israel that would be considered part of those who were once under the Torah. So it's possible he could be speaking in part to them, because I think when you get to the churches in Rome, some of them would be of the children of Israel, some of them would be of the Gentiles. So he could be writing to both of them. But I think it likely here that he is speaking to the Gentiles primarily, for you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear. Actually, when you read it that way, maybe he is writing in this moment to Israelites, because there are other things in this letter that makes you think he's writing to Israelites, not just those who are of the Gentile ecclesia. All right, but you received the Ruach of adoption as sons, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. So according to, if you remember, and we're going to see it again here in just a second. So the adoption of sons were to those who are under Torah. So now we are talking about somebody having received the Ruach, the spirit of adoption, as sons, and through whom and by whom we cry out, Abba, Father, Father. Okay, so Israel, those who are under Torah, are amongst those who received the adoption and cry out, Abba, Father. But a Gentile who joins themselves to Israel is also joining themselves to the adoption, to the children of Israel, and then also can cry out as Abba, Father. Let's move on to the next. So here we are in Romans. I believe this is chapter 9. Nope, we're still in 18. So what's he saying here? Oops, we'll start in verse 22. For we know that all creation groans together and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only so, but even we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Ruach, the beginnings of the Ruach, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our body. Now, this is very interesting, because, as he has said in the previous two passages, that it's suggestive that Israel has received adoption. But what is this adoption that he's referring to? Because when he says eagerly waiting, Messiah has come and gone. He's been crucified and now he's up in the heavenlies. How far out are we? 20 years, 30 years? Something like that past the death of Messiah. And here we have Paul in Romans talking about eagerly waiting for the adoption as sons and the redemption of our body. So this is this adoption of sons as sons and the redemption of our body must be a future event in Paul's time. And if it was a future event in Paul's time, I suggest it's a future event in our time as we speak now. But this future event involves the adoption as sons, and it includes the redemption of our body. First of all, when we know he's eagerly awaiting, he's usually eagerly awaiting the promises, which is it's the second coming of Messiah when he comes to gather his elect from Sheol and from the four corners of the world to redeem our bodies. So we know that we're, generally speaking, eagerly awaiting that second coming, and we know that the redemption of our body takes place at that second coming. And so certainly he seems to be referencing in this passage an adoption as sons as that event, which I call, because I think that's what scriptures teach, this redemption of our body, that second coming, is that new covenant. It is now the initiation of that new or renewed covenant. That is the promise. It is the covenant of peace. It is the time when we receive our bodies and now literally can stand before our Father and enter into our Father. Okay, so let's go see the next one. So here we are. The fourth one, starting in, what is this? This is chapter 9, verse 3. For I myself could have wanted to be banished from Messiah for the sake of my brothers, my relatives, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, and whose is the adoption. So for those who are thinking that the adoption is a new covenant issue, and one of the definers of the new covenant, because we have an adoption, and an adoption might involve legal precedent and all these things that go into the idea of covenants, well, it already existed by all appearances. First of all, we already had him in Galatians talking about the adoption of sons being to those who were under Torah, which was Israel. But here he is in Romans, literally saying it's for the Israelites. It's the Israelites whose is the adoption. Now, are we talking about adoption from the old days? Adoption, pre-Messiah, or adoption? I don't think it. I think it's either going to be an adoption pre-coming of Messiah that they would have been considered adopted. But according to Rome and Paul's explanation here, it sure seems it might also be that adoption that takes place at the second coming and the resurrection of the second coming. So whether this adoption here that he's referencing is pre the second coming or at the second coming, whatever it is, it belongs to the Israelites and not to the Gentile believing nation, some Gentile believing church of a second covenant to whom a different covenant is made, and that the adoption belongs to them. No, the adoption belongs to Israel, and to the extent that a believing Gentile can enter into adoption, it's all dependent upon their entering into the promises of Israel, basically joining Israel. Israel will never join the church. Church joins the church. So when an Israelite becomes a believer, they do not join this new covenant Gentile church. No, an Israelite just simply embraces what they've had all along. A Gentile, when they believe, actually joins that Israel and the covenant people, the ecclesia, the called out ones, the separate ones. But either way, the adoption belongs to Israel. Let's go look at the fifth, the last of our adoptions, references to adoption. So here we are in Ephesians. And let's just start at verse 3. Baruch be the Elohim and Father of our Adon Yahushua HaMashiach, who has barak us with every spiritual barakah in the Shemayim in Mashiach. So with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in Messiah, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world. Chose who? Chose Paul. If he's speaking to Israel, he chose them before the foundation of the world through the nation of Israel. But if he's speaking to an Ephesian who is a Gentile believer, Yahuwah chose that Gentile believer also in him before the beginning of the world, before it ever began, because he knew that he would join himself to Israel. Okay, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be Kodesh, set apart, and blameless, which is usually holy in modern, in English translations, that we should be Kodesh and blameless before him in love, having previously ordained us to adoption as sons through Yahushua HaMashiach to himself, according to the good pleasure of his desire. Well, okay. Having previously ordained us to adoption. Well, who is us? If Paul is talking to himself in his place and position as an Israelite, it sounds like when he was in the Galatians and the letters to the Romans, that he's identifying that the adoption belonged to Israel, so that Yahuwah, would have ordained us to adoption, us, Israel, to adoption as sons through Yahushua HaMashiach, to himself according to the good pleasure of his desire, to the praise of the esteem of his favor, which he favored us in the beloved. To the extent that the Ephesian is joining into this adoption is entirely, again, dependent upon them joining Israel, joining the Kodeshim, joining the set apart ones, joining those who are of the adoption according to the teachings of Paul. And just to finish this out, having previously ordained us to the adoption as sons, this would be the passages where he is talking about how at one time the Gentiles, were separated. The Gentiles having heard the word of the truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom also having believed you were sealed with the Ruach HaKodesh, having heard the good news that they could be delivered right alongside of Israel, and who is the pledge of our inheritance. The Ruach HaKodesh, who is the pledge of our inheritance. Whose inheritance? Israel's inheritance. And now the Ephesians who have joined themselves to Israel, until the redemption of the purchased possession, and to the praise of his esteem. Now I will say this is also referencing, if this is, and I think it is referencing that second coming, that second, it's the new and or renewed covenant that comes at his second coming, when we receive that the promises at that time when we are resurrected. Well, that's the redemption of the purchased possession. Who purchased the possession? Yahushua, through his blood, purchased the possession. What is the possession? The promises and the inheritance. The possession is the inheritance that got purchased, the possession of the inheritance that was purchased through Yahushua, that has yet to be redeemed, because that's what we're waiting for. So for everybody who thinks that when Yahushua at the Pesach, at the Passover supper, when he says, take this cup, that's the cup of the new covenant in my blood, thinks that he initiated the new covenant. Here's another passage that suggests, no, he bought it. His blood was going to purchase it. We would now have that's what he's doing. He's purchased the inheritance and the possessions, which is the new covenant, the covenant of peace. But he did not at that time initiate it or redeem it. And what is Paul saying here in the Ephesians? He's talking about the pledge, which is something that means that you're holding in something in pledge until you actually receive what is coming. So the purchased possession has yet to be redeemed. In the meantime, we have a pledge of that purchased possession. Another evidence that we are not in the new covenant yet. The new covenant is the promise that is still forthcoming. Purchased by his blood. We have helps since his first coming through the Ruach HaKodesh, which is this promise here, this promise and the pledge, the thing that is going to help us while we remain in the flesh, walk through and achieve the inheritance. Okay. The I'll stop that and let's see if we can go finish up so I can end this video and let you go. Give me a second. I'm going to go find it. Okay, so basically it's all of chapter 2. And to finish this out, I am going to read chapter 2 and just make comments as we go. And you, verse 1, and you were dead in trespasses and sins. This was the condition of a Gentile before because they would have never, and actually even the Israelites were dead in trespasses and sins. We had no hope while we remained in our trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. So this would clearly be germane to Gentiles who were walking according to all their understandings, all the Elohims of this world, all of their idols, all of their doctrines and things that they were walking in, but they were walking according to the course of this world that is led by the ruler and the authority of the air, which we understand to be Satan, our adversary, among whom also we all lived in the lust of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, as also the rest. So while I mentioned that this would be the Gentiles up here, but this would also be Israel. If Israel was not walking in the ways of Yahweh, they were also walking in trespasses and sins, not embracing the things that were theirs by bloodline. And so they had lost it. And until they would turn back to it, repent and return to the commands and returned to the ways, until they would repent and return, they would remain lost in their sins and trespasses. So everybody was by nature a child of wrath, walking apart from Yahuwah. But Yahuwah, who is rich in compassion, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in these trespasses, made us alive together with Mashiach. So Mashiach overcame, he made him alive, and to all who will believe in Mashiach, to Israelite and Gentile alike, we are going to be delivered from the death of, deadness in trespasses, to be made alive with Mashiach by the favor. And by this favor, all of us, the Gentiles and Israelites, all of us alike have been saved, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the Shemayim in Mashiach. So as he sits up there, we, because he did all this work for us, and all who return to him are effectively sitting there right alongside of him. If not literally, as I've heard some teach, still figuratively, we are right there in Mashiach, sitting in the Shemayim, which is the heavens, alongside Messiah, alongside the Father, in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding riches of his favor and kindness toward us in Yahushua. Well, what are the coming ages? If the coming ages, at the time that he's writing to the Ephesians, which are decades after Messiah's coming, he's talking about a coming age. Is that not the second coming? That second coming age when we receive that second coming, and as we were just talking about, the redemption of the promises and our inheritance, those promises and that inheritance is the exceeding riches of his favor and kindness. And how did we get it? And through Mashiach. And when is it coming? In the coming ages. For by favor you have been saved through belief. And belief is not just an acquiescence. Oh, I believe Yahushua must have come and lived. No. Belief. You follow him. Just like you need to believe Yahuwah the Father, you now need to believe Yahushua the Son. And quite frankly, Yahushua the Son, believing in him is the same thing as believing in the Father, because Yahushua the Son does everything in perfect representation that the Father desires and asks for. Okay, so for by favor you have been saved through belief, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of Elohim. He gave Elohim wrought us our salvation. And it's not by works. We cannot be justified by works so that anyone should boast. Not that we aren't supposed to keep Torah. We are supposed to keep Torah, but we'll never be justified by it so that we can say, oh yeah, I got my salvation because I did the works. I did Torah. No, because nobody can get there from that. But let me also say, when we see elsewhere in scriptures that that we are saved unto good works, we're still talking about the works of Torah. We are saved unto good works. We're not saved by works. We're not saved by the works, but we are saved through Yahushua unto good works, which is the keeping of Torah, not just the Torah of Moshe, all Torah that our Father and Yahushua, our Son, our Savior, would give to us. For we are His workmanship, created in Mashiach. Well, here's the unto good works. Created in Mashiach unto good works. And I know that the church would receive that as, works because I go and do something and I've got a ministry and no. Unto good works means to just be obedient to Torah, all Torah, the Torah of Moshe and all Torah that you see and comes to you, which had Yahuwah prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. What is the Here it is, good works. He prepared beforehand. Now I know the church would receive that as, again, going back to this idea that, well, I have to have a ministry, I have to go do this, I have to go do a mission and all these. No. What He prepared beforehand is the Torah of Moshe, that we should walk in them. Yahuwah prepared beforehand the good works that we should walk in. Another evidence that what we are called to and walking in the Spirit is actually walking according to the good works that He has identified, that is found in the Torah, and that we should walk in them. Therefore, in verse 11, remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision. This would be Israel trying to say, we are Israel and you guys are Gentiles. We are the chosen. Well, even those who are calling themselves the circumcision will not be found to be circumcision if they have turned away and not received. And those of the uncircumcision that they like to call the uncircumcision, which would be those who do not have the original promises, that never had it first, but now they are called to the promises. Okay. Gentiles, who were the uncircumcised are being called to the promises, that at that time you were without Mashiach, excluded from the citizenship of Israel. So when you were in the uncircumcision, when you were born in your trespasses, etc., you were apart. You did not have the things of Israel. You were not part of it. And before you did turn and join, you were without Mashiach because Mashiach belongs to Israel. You were excluded from the citizenship of Israel because you weren't born into it and you were not following it. You did not have Mashiach to bring you into it. And strangers, meaning you did not understand the covenants of promises. You were not part of, maybe understands the wrong word. You just did not have. You were not in relationship with the covenants of promises before you joined Israel, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. So all these Gentiles they did not have the hope of Israel and were without Elohim in the world. So whatever they were worshiping and doing in the world would have been apart from Elohim. It would have been idolatry. It would have been apart from Him. So clearly the Gentiles were not part of Israel. Israel had the promises and Gentiles were outside of it. Now, Israel, who had the promises, had the ability to lose it, because if you were bloodline, if you were born into Israel and would not keep the covenant, you would not keep Torah. If you would not follow Him, if you did not operate in belief and faith, you would lose your position as the circumcision. Okay, verse 13. But now in Mashiach, Yahushua, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of HaMashiach. He has made the way for the Gentiles to be delivered. But not just the Gentiles. I mean, Paul's talking to the Gentiles, but he also made deliverance for that remnant of Israel also. For He is our peace, who has made both one, Israel and Gentiles, made them one in Israel. And having broken down the partition of the barrier, bloodlines of Israel and not bloodlines of Israel, circumcision and uncircumcision according to Israel, broken down that barrier, that partition, so that all could join Israel, the covenant people, whether you were born of Israel or born of outside of Israel and of the Gentiles, abolishing in His flesh the enmity, the law of the commands and dogma, and the things that separated them, so as to create in Himself one renewed man from the two, thus making peace, and to completely restore. Well, let me go up here in case you think I'm glossing it. Because the law of the commands and dogma, there are lots of things this could be. And in the past, I have explained it in different ways, because there is commands in dogma could be representing what the Pharisees would offer up as their commands, which are not Torah. That's not what we're called to keep, the command of a Pharisee just because he says so and he's given you your oral traditions. And so that could be the commands in dogma, and that could be part of the enmity, but it could also simply be the literal Torah being the law of the commands because it was a separating thing. Israel had the Torah. They embraced the Torah. They knew it separated them from the Gentiles. The Gentiles did not have Torah. And so that was one of the dividing lines between the circumcised and the uncircumcised. But he's abolished in his flesh the enmity, the law of the commands, which could be also the concept of being under Torah, being trying to be justified by Torah. All of these things that were setting up and becoming a dividing line. Well, in his flesh, he's resolved it. He has made the way for all. Nobody's going to be justified. Nobody, not the circumcised or the uncircumcised, will be justified by Torah. So there is no longer that dividing line anymore. Neither of them are going to be justified by Torah, but both of them are going to be called unto the good works which he had prepared beforehand that we should walk in them, which are the Torah, as it's just the Torah. Okay, so let's keep going and finish this up. Having abolished in his flesh, okay, and verse 16, and to completely restore to favor both of them unto Elohim in one body through the stake, having destroyed the enmity by it. So we now have Israel and Gentile together, one body. And having come, he brought as good news, peace to you who were far off, and peace to those near. So peace to the Gentile who was far off, and peace to the Israelite who was near to the covenants of promise. You were far, you who were once far off, brought near to the covenants of promise. Okay. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Ruah. So this is that spirit of adoption that Israel had all along, the spirit of adoption that, as Paul has introduced to us, that Israel has had, and now the Gentiles can cry through that same spirit of adoption, have access to the Father and call him Abba, Father. So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the Kodeshim and members of the household of Elohim. So the Gentiles, have joined in the citizenship and the commonwealth of Israel, which are the Kodeshim. So true Israel are the Kodeshim, the set apart ones, those who would be the chosen and the elect, those who are truly following him. And the Gentiles are now joining that and becoming members of the household of Elohim, the children of Elohim. Having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and the prophets, the emissaries would be apostles, the eyewitnesses, and the prophets, Yahushua HaMashiach himself being the chief cornerstone through which all of this becomes possible, in whom all the building being joined together grows into a Kodesh Mishkan, house in Yahuwah, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of Elohim in the Ruah. Okay, so I know that I kind of morphed from the discussion of adoption, but it's interrelated because adoption belongs to Israel. Adoption belongs to Gentiles in the sense that they have joined themselves to Israel. The concept that adoption is part of a new covenant is not, it's just not true, because if Israel had adoption, they had it under the first covenant. And there's no reason to believe that Gentiles have received a new covenant yet if Israel is still operating in the old covenant. It's just that Gentiles would be identifying alongside of Israel in the redemption, but according to the contemporary or the first covenant, awaiting, as we have said earlier in this, awaiting all that redemption of the promise, which is the inheritance, the purchased possession and the inheritance of our resurrected body. That's when all of this is going to come to us. This is what we are all hoping for and waiting upon. All right, with that, I'll let you go, and thank you, and may you be Baruch.